Here's our staff back 3. There's like a mood who you have back through a little surprised we need to have a very serious and very direct conversation about what the Indiana Fever just did in their road game against the Toronto Tempo, because the 101-95 victory was one of the most dramatic, nerve-wracking frankly revealing wins this franchise has produced all season. This game contained individual milestones that extend historical records, a heated confrontation that nobody expected from Kelsey Mitchell, a significant injury concern that has the basketball community genuinely worried about what comes next, and the kind of late-game near collapse that should be keeping the coaching staff up at night even while celebrating a road victory. Let us start with Caitlin Clark, because her performance deserves full and complete acknowledgement before anything else enters this conversation. Clark finished with 24 points, scoring 7 of 16 from the field and 4 of 9 from three-point range. The three-pointers are worth highlighting specifically because her recent stretch had been producing nearly to 3-point makes per game, and seeing her connect on 4 in a single road game reflects a shooting performance suggesting the long-range accuracy is continuing to develop back toward the elite efficiency her historical numbers represent. She also extended the longest streak in WNBA history of games with 20 or more points and 5 or more assists, adding another entry to a record that continues growing every time she steps on the floor and competes. Said this sustained level, Clark received a notable and genuine reception from fans at the away venue, which reflects the commercial and cultural reality that has been building around her throughout this entire era. This is not an Indiana phenomenon confined to home games. It is a Caitlin Clark phenomenon that extends to every arena she enters, regardless of geography or competitive context. When she gets introduced at a road venue and the response reflects authentic audience investment, it communicates exactly what this player generates everywhere she goes. There's the kind of organic fan connection that no marketing campaign can manufacture and no broadcast framing can diminish. Was crossed with Robin. Now let us talk about what happened between Kelsey Mitchell and Mabrey, because this confrontation was genuinely unexpected and reflected a level of competitive heat that nobody saw coming from Mitchell. Specifically, Mitchell got into a direct physical and verbal confrontation with Mabrey during this game that involved her putting her finger directly in Mabrey's face. The kind of gesture carries a specific and unmistakable meaning in competitive basketball. When someone puts their finger in your face during a game, they are not being casual or performative. They are sending a clear message that something has crossed a line and they are no longer going to absorb it without a direct and visible risk. Mitchell, who is generally not known for losing her composure or getting drawn into this kind of confrontational moment, was fully engaged and fully serious in this exchange. The competitive intensity was genuine. There was nothing theatrical about the interaction. Observers watching the footage noted that Mitchell's she reflected authentic competitive investment rather than calculated showmanship designed to fire up teammates or generate a call. Mabrey has built a reputation throughout her professional career as a player who competes with an edge that can provoke responses from opponents. She plays with a style that generates friction. The confrontation between her and Mitchell became one of the more discussed moments from this game beyond the actual basketball outcomes. Mitchell was not backing down. She was not pretending to be unbothered. She was genuinely bothered, and she made that visible, direct, and unambiguous in the way that players communicate when they want to make absolutely certain the message is received, and understood the competitive fire that the Mabrey confrontation revealed. And Mitchell is actually significant context for understanding what came next, which was the most concerning development from this entire game. Mitchell left the game before the fourth quarter began and did not return for any of the final period. She played 0 minutes of the fourth quarter of a game that Indiana nearly lost despite holding a 17-point lead at one point. Let that sit in its full and complete weight. Mitchell's departure happened as this game was in the process of becoming genuinely competitive again after Indiana's substantial advantage began eroding rapidly, and the team had to finish this road game without one of its primary offensive contributors. In the final quarter, when the outcome was still very much in question, the parallels being drawn to what happened during last season's playoff run are pointed and entirely legitimate. Mitchell experienced a significant physical situation during last year's postseason that affected Indiana's competitive trajectory in ways the franchise has been trying to process. And yes, ever since, the physical demands of maintaining a consecutive 20-plus point scoring streak across this number of games, combined with the kind of full engagement competitive intensity that was visible in the confrontation with Mabrey and the accumulated physical stress of a full season approaching its most critical and higher stakes moments, create exactly the environment where the injury situations this franchise has experienced before tend to materialize, with consequences that extend beyond individual games. The organizational priority attached to maintaining the consecutive game scoring streak is now the subject of a pointed, legitimate, and important question: if the physical cost of maintaining that streak is contributing to a situation where Mitchell cannot finish a game in the fourth quarter during the final stretch of the regular season. When every game carries postseason implications, the franchise needs to think carefully and honestly about whether the streak justifies the risk it may be creating. No consecutive game achievement, regardless of how historically significant it becomes, is worth compromising a key contributor's physical availability during the postseason games that define a season's legacy and the permanent record. Mitchell finished with 29 points on 4 of 6 from three-point range and made all of her free throws before departure. The production was excellent and reflected the individual output her consecutive scoring streak has required throughout this entire stretch. The question of what happens next with her physical status is now the most pressing organizational question this team faces heading into the final days of the regular season and the beginning of postseason in competition. Now let us address the box score reality of what this one actually looked like in its full and honest context, because this 6-point final margin communicates something very different from what the game actually felt like in real time. The Indiana Fever held a lead of 17 points. In this game, 17, and they nearly lost. The largest lead in the game was 17 points, and the final margin was 6. The distance between those two numbers is the story within the story of this victory, and it reflects the late-game execution and defensive consistency problems that have been appearing throughout Indiana's recent stretch, even as the victories have been accumulating in the standings column. Indiana shot 53% from the field and 11 of 25 from three-point range. Across the full game, they shot 84% from the free throw line. They had 32 rebounds. These are the kinds of numbers that should produce a comfortable and decisive victory, rather than a tense 6-point escape in the closing minutes of a road game. And then there were some even team turnovers, 17 turnovers. That number is the single statistic that most directly explains how a 17-point advantage nearly evaporated completely against the Toronto Tempo. 17 turnovers in a game where Indiana had a double-digit lead that should have been managed, protected, and extended rather than surrendered, is a recipe for exactly the kind of postseason disaster that has ended their previous playoff runs. Before genuine championship momentum could develop and sustain, these turnovers are not random statistical noise. They reflect something real and persistent about how this team manages its decision-making when opposing defenses and use the pressure, and they have been appearing with a consistency across recent games that demands direct organizational attention rather than optimistic dismissal based on the final outcome. Indiana also got out-rebounded again in this game. The 32 rebounds Indiana gathered were not sufficient to win the rebounding battle against Toronto. This pattern continues to appear regardless of the identity of the opposing team, which suggests that represents a systemic issue rooted in how this team is constructed and deployed rather than a matchup-specific problem that will resolve itself organically in the postseason. Only Boston contributed 16 points and 6 rebounds. Mikal attempts and produced 8 points and 7 rebounds, continuing her effective run in the starting lineup. The 7 rebounds from Timpson are specifically meaningful because Indiana has been losing the rebounding battle consistently, and the interior presence she brings has been one of the more positive structural developments of this second-half stretch. Lexi Hall managed only for points and/or floor time, continuing a pattern of limited offensive contribution that remains one of the unresolved roster questions this team will carry to postseason competition. Sophie Cunningham was booed significantly at this away venue during the game. The crowd response reflects a reality Cunningham has been navigating throughout this entire season. Her visibility in the cultural conversation surrounding this franchise, the public position she has taken, and the stances she has been willing to adopt regardless of social consequences have made her a target for audience hostility at various venues this year. The Indiana fan base that has been firmly behind her through everything this season understands who and reflects about the broader environment this team has been competing within, and Cunningham has demonstrated consistently that she is not going to alter her approach based on crowd reaction at opposing venues. The backcourt pairing of Clark and Mitchell has been described throughout the season as one of the most compelling individual combinations in the entire WNBA when both of them are healthy and both producing at their individual ceilings. This is a backcourt that genuinely separates Indiana from the alternatives available in the postseason landscape. The uncertainty surrounding Mitchell's fourth-quarter departure now makes the question of whether both of them will be fully available and fully healthy for the most important games of the season. The most pressing thing the organization needs to address with transparency and directness toward the fan base that has invested so deeply in this team's trajectory. The win is real, the road victory was earned, and it extends Indiana's competitive momentum heading toward the games that will determine where they sit when the postseason bracket is finalized. Indiana has demonstrated over a meaningful recent stretch that they are capable of winning against quality opposition when the key pieces are performing at the levels that is genuine and important evidence about this team's competitive ceiling. But the 17 turnovers, the 17-point lead that nearly became a lot, the Mitchell injury concern resulting in a 0 minutes equally relevant to an honest assessment of where this franchise stands. Mitchell's health going forward is now the most significant variable in Indiana postseason outlook. The consecutive scoring streak is impressive and reflects genuine individual achievement, but the basketball community watching what happened in the fourth quarter is asking the obvious and necessary question about whether the organizational priority attached to maintaining that streak is compatible with the physical preservation of a player whose full health is essential to what this team is trying to accomplish. Indiana won. Clark delivered 24 points, including for three-pointers, and extended her own WNBA historical record. Timpson contributed 7 rebounds. Mitchell hit 29 points, had a genuine and heated confrontation with Mabrey that revealed exactly how invested she is in this stretch, and then left before the fourth quarter and never came back.